we are going to be moving on. And as I mentioned previously also, then the next thing we are going to do, it's going to consist of two parts. There's still going to be some content, something spoken about, and then we are going to get to the Q&A part. So once again, there is going to be a QR code right there, and while our next speaker is going through the content, feel free to already leave some questions there. So without further ado, I would like to welcome the executive from HubSpot and Tyre Angel, Dan Tyre.
Thank you very much.
Round of applause, please. Hey, Dan. Yeah.
Nice. All right, so I was asked to go to some of the slides. That's you guys. Does that look like you? It's hard being entrepreneurs. HubSpot journey, pretty amazing. We talked a little bit about culture and growth. Let me just spend a little bit of time on this slide. I explained a little bit about how important culture is to any scaling company. As soon as you go out of one room, you have to spend money, time, and effort to make sure you bear hug your employees, right? It's critical in 2024 to make sure that they know that you appreciate them, that you're going to be vested in their growth, and that they understand the mission and want to grow with it. So one of the things that I have in all of our portfolio companies, every single employee has what's called a personal development plan. And what that is, their manager has to sit with them and say, what is your personal goals for the next 24 months? And they have to come up with those goals. The manager needs to know what those goals are. They put it on a piece of paper, and then they work through a series of online education and or mentoring and or classroom training and or projects that they take, so there is an opportunity for that person to grow into their particular goals. Do you see how that kind of changes the game for employees, where there's an emphasis on aligning the goals of the company with their personal development? Number two, I talked briefly about how I've called people's parents, which is super fun for me, right? Anybody who has kids, anybody who calls them up and said, thank you so much for lending your daughter to us for 5 years. She's a great employee, and thank you very much. It's a cool thing to do, and then people do anything for a breakfast sandwich. All right, the inbound marketing, which was the start of HubSpot, is a huge competitive advantage, right? And inbound marketing is tricking out your website, so when people come there, it's not all about you, right? It's all about the problems that you solve for your specific demographic, right? And it was innovative at the time, right? It's still innovative in 2024. If your website isn't tricked out with free offers, checklists, calls to action, landing pages, you're a little behind the game, right? Google makes billions of dollars a month on the pay-per-click, right? And the organic results are worth arguably trillions of dollars, right? So understanding how to optimize your website so you're connecting with people who are looking for you is one of the biggest changes and revolutions in the 21st century. We talked a little bit about the inbound sales process, and I always ask people, what's the best type of leads for your company? Can I take questions for the audience? Can somebody, what's the best kind of leads that you love getting? How about anybody?
Word.
What's that?
Word.
Word of mouth. Why? Why are word of mouth leads the leads that you love? That's the right answer. And everybody, I ask people, do you get word of mouth leads? They're like, yeah. I'm like, do you want more? They're like, yeah, that's not the way it works. You can't have a strategy for word of mouth leads. I'm like, yes, you can. And the reason why most people want them is because they move more quickly through the process, right? If I tell you you should go and work with Amy Tyre, life coach, you'd be like, okay. And I'm lending that credibility, so you're less price sensitive. You've already essentially made the decision. You're like, Tyre told me to go do this, and you're moving right along, right? So to facilitate that, you move from a funnel concept to what we call a flywheel. And this is the HubSpot flywheel. HubSpot invented this in 2014. It's very interesting because the growth is the focus, right? And you put your customers at the middle of your flywheel. Your customers are your best lead generation for additional customers. And the whole idea is that you're using the whole inbound philosophy to take strangers that have no idea who you are, and you're going to attract them to your website or attract them to your community, right? And there's a variety of ways to do that. Once they become prospects, right, they may not be ready to engage. They may just be in education mode. But if you're really an expert in your industry and you're focused on a specific niche, there's got to be tons of ways that you can add value before somebody buys stuff, right? They call it the freemium model, right? On my website, there are lots of things that you can download at no charge, just so I'm providing service for you. And that's the underlying foundation of the inbound process, right? Once they become prospects, and you've attracted them, then you want to engage them. And what that means is offering product, services, anything that you can so that you're building credibility and trust, right? And then once they become customers, you want to make sure you have delighted customers, right? In the old days, if the customer wasn't delighted, it was no big deal, right? They'd call up your boss and they'd say, Tyre sold me something wrong, and my boss would say, yes, he did, and just hang up. Today, right, with the visibility of social media, if you don't have happy customers, right, you're not going to have a growth company. And your happy customers will be advocates for you, right, on social media, on your website. So your whole HubSpot flywheel, the way in which you get customers, is engage with those good customers and ask them, all right, who that's not competitive with you would be valuable for our service, right? And you can facilitate that word of mouth leads. So what I tell entrepreneurs to do all the time is call your best customers. And they're like, on the phone? I'm like, yeah, how else are you going to call them? Maybe through your CRM. And they're like, what do I say? You say, first of all, do a little research, right? In 2024, you don't really want to do a cold call, right? Anybody cold call in the audience? Raise your hand. No one ever raises their hand, right? If you cold call, you're ashamed, right? First of all, it's not a lot of fun for the people you cold call. Second of all, it's not a fun for people who are actually doing it. The turnover in that industry is ridiculous, right? The actual effectiveness, it's a multi-billion-dollar business worldwide. The actual effectiveness of a cold call is less than 1%. And there's no other business function or activity that you would do if 99% of your time, effort, money was wasted other than this archaic way in which these companies like just do what we've done since, I don't know, the telephone was invented in 1970 or something like that, right? I didn't mean to say the telephone was invented in 1970, but cold calling probably around that time, right? But calling your customers and saying, doing a little research first, that's what we call warm calling, right? I want to know who I'm calling. I want to know a little bit about the company. I want to know a little bit about the relationship that we have with that company. I pick up the phone and Mr. Jones, this is Dan from HubSpot. He's like, okay, who are you? I'm like, I'm the account manager, or I'm an executive, or I'm the CEO of your company, and I wanted to thank you for your business. We appreciate the fact that you've worked with us for the last 6 years, and I wanted to make a personal call on my cell phone so that you have my phone number, and we hope to be a partner for you for the next 6 years. Do you think that would make an impression? Raise your hand if you think that makes an impression. Exactly. They're like, who are you again? I'm like, I'm an executive, and I wanted to call you, number one, and thank you. Number two, you now have a direct connection. If something goes wrong anywhere along the line, you text me, right? And I'll be back to you within 48 hours, or I'll have somebody call on behalf. We appreciate it. Oh, by the way, is there anybody that you know in your circle that might be interested in providing the service that we provide? And the person usually says, I'll think about that. And then I'll use the very effective line, okay, let me make it easy for you. I have your email here. I'm going to send you a description of what we do that you can send to anybody and just copy me, right? And I'll do all the work. I appreciate any type of reference or support that you can give me. If you do just 2 calls a week, right, that can have a massive impact on your growth and your value. And once you get the flywheel going, does anybody know what a flywheel is, by the way? Any car people in the audience? Right? In an internal combustion engine, you have a flywheel that moves the pistons. Or if you're a potter, you know, any potters in the audience? Not a lot of entrepreneurs that overlap with potters. Anybody see the movie Ghost, where Demi Moore is like a potter and she... Yeah, you did, right? Some people remember that. Patrick Swayze's dead now, right? I don't know if he couldn't have been dead when he did the movie. Maybe that's why they call it a ghost. I'm not sure. Anyway, when you step on the potter's wheel, it goes around. And so the whole flywheel concept is that it's force and friction. The more force you have, the more calls you make to your customers, the more like leads that'll come in. And then you want to make it easy to buy, right? You have to use this phrase, or you don't have to, but I highly recommend, let me make it easy for you. No matter who calls you, you're like, okay, if you're in education mode, let me give you all the free education. People are sometimes skeptical. I'll call people and they'll say, I don't cold call, I warm call. I probably call 10 people a month that I've never talked to. And I'm like, this is Dan from HubSpot. They're like, okay. And I'm like, I saw that you went to Tech Chill in Riga, Latvia. Is that the first time you've ever been to Latvia? They're like, no, I live there. And I'm like, probably should have seen that from your LinkedIn. And they're like, why are you calling me? You know the voice tone that you get. If you've ever been on the other end, they're, why are you calling me? I'm calling to help. And they're like, help with what? I'm like, it depends. What do you need help with? And they're like, what? Hold on a second. And then I'll say, I work with entrepreneurs in scale-up companies in the Baltics that are looking to double revenue in 2024. Does that sound like you? Now, let's break down that amazing message because there's a lot packed into that. Number one, I was being a little facetious. And if the person you're talking to is like got a white shirt and a red tie, and doesn't look like they want a little joking in their life, we use a little bit different approach, right? We use Mr. and Mrs. or Doctor. We make sure that we play it straight-laced. But if they look like, I don't know, they got a beanie on and they got a little goatee, man, maybe they'll laugh at my jokes. Let's see. And it's harder in Germany and in other parts of the world, but you're going to read the room a little bit. That's part of the process. And then you're going to call that person. And when they say, help with what? You're going to have that power statement that's going to talk about the ways that you can help. And if you're looking for a job and I call you and say, I work with entrepreneurs who just left their startup and looking for their next adventure. Does that sound like you? And it is, right? Boom. I'm like, tell me more about that, which is the classic line in the Connect call. Tell me more about that, right? I don't want to do all the talking, right? When I control a Connect call in the flywheel, I am asking good questions. First of all, I'm doing my research. Number two, I'm engaging with good voice tone. You hear this voice tone? It sounds like confident voice tone. When I call you, you'll remember. Prospects should give me $45 just to call them, just so that I'm like teaching them process. And I'm asking them questions that I already know the answer to, right? Because I've already done the research. I know the person is trying to double their revenue. I know they're a startup someplace in Estonia. I know that they have done something because I just Googled it, or I looked on ChatGPT, or I just did a little bit of evaluation, or I will say, I'm calling because Louise asked me to call you. And they're like, Louise? Yeah, the lady from Tech Chill. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know Louise. She's my cousin. I'm like, no way. Cool. All right. Well, she said that you may be interested in that. And this flywheel makes it easier for you to engage, makes it easier for you to connect, and makes it easier for you to grow. All right. Any questions on that? All right. This is the other thing that I want to talk about. People crave community. The Tech Chill community is amazing, right? I don't know any of you people, but I know you're nice. I know that you're motivated. I know that you're in some place in the Baltic entrepreneur ecosystem. And the reason I know that is because I've observed these common values that I see all of the time, right? It's so hard to create, right? It took 13 years, Andres was telling me last night, started from a little bit of thing to get to this level. But it's so valuable, right? Human beings being social animals, we want to interact with other human beings, right? The tables are amazing, right? The like one-on-one conversations, tremendous. The hard work that people put in to present that. Creating that community is hard. And it has to be thoughtful. And in the old days, people bought a product because it had a certain product feature. And the reason you bought one product, IBM rather than digital equipment, is because there was one product feature. But in the age of Agile, where all of the product features are pretty much similar, right? If Salesforce has a product and HubSpot doesn't have it, we'll have it in 6 months, right? That's just the way it works. And it works vice versa. So all products are pretty much the same because you can develop, and it's going to be even more accelerated in the AI stage, right? Because code will write code, and you'll be able to have everything featured. So the only differentiating factor is not only how you sell, but how you create the community. And if you believe in the flywheel concept, this community needs to be nurtured, it needs to be invested in. You need to find your super addicts, the people who love your product, the people who will say things that your employees won't even say, the people who will get very excited about the value that you create, and you need to make them in the foundation, in the middle of the flywheel. Those people can generate more of those word-of-mouth leads, and those are least expensive, highest value, that move the quickest through education, through a decision-making process. All right, make sense? All right, we're going to questions in a little bit. Here, I wanted to spend 5 minutes. Can I do 5 more minutes on Baltic stuff? Okay, good. As entrepreneurs, you should know this. All right, I showed the picture of HubSpot from 0 to $2 billion, and it looks so beautiful when you stand on the stage and turn around and say, that's what we did. Internal to HubSpot, it was amazing, right? Because it was always hard. Right? Everybody thinks we just sat on our chairs and people faxed in their POs. You guys remember faxes? I'm kind of dating myself, but and then it was super easy. It's never super easy, right? It's what Sultan said. You write your business plan, other investors and advisors and VC people, you write your business plan, and then you go out and get customers. Everything changes. Right? You don't know squat when you write your business plan. You're making a hypothesis, and then actually when you get customers, you see kind of that value. And that's a messy process. It's not for the faint of heart. You guys know that, right? But I don't want you to get discouraged when the shit hits the fan, right? I want you to say, okay, that's why I got in, right? When people are suing you, when your top developer leaves, when your VC who promised you a term sheet says, no, we decided not to go with it, when your competitor launches another feature, that's when you gotta just keep going, right? And that's part of the entrepreneurial experience, right? And it's valuable to recognize that up front. In my first startup, when I went through that, I'm like, holy shit, how are we gonna get that done, right? Somehow we survived, right? And amazing. All right. We talked about everything starts with customers. It's not that hard to learn to sell. The one thing I'll say is I've written a couple of books, Inbound Organizations, Leadership Principles, but I wrote the foreword to Inbound Selling, right? In inbound selling, raise your hand if you like to help people. You don't like to help people? You're not paying attention. Get off your Facebook. Come on. Now, most everybody likes to help. As entrepreneurs, that's what you want to do, right? You want to help other people. And the foundation for the inbound sales process is helping people. Right? Number one, you treat people like a human being, right? Number two, you shouldn't have to remind people that you have to treat people like a human being in 2024, but you do, right? You get spam emails, you get all this crazy stuff, you get people who, everybody's a little aggressive on email, right? And they never say that stuff if you were looking at them right in the same room, but they're all I don't know, John Wayne when it comes. Is John Wayne a relevant reference to this group? No, they're like The Rock. You guys know The Rock in the United States? He's like a big, burly kind of guy. All right, so the ability to use inbound selling, which is treat people like human beings, and then all you do is help. So when I call people, I'm like, I'm here to help. And they're like, help with what? And I'm like, it depends. Usually I help people grow, right? And they're like, grow? What do you mean? I'm like, you need more customers. What's the answer to that? No one's ever said, I alluded to it earlier, if you're in Italy, sometimes they say, no, we have enough customers. I'm like, really? That's the only country in the world I've ever seen that response. But every place else, in the Baltics, people say, I want to grow. I'm like, all right, do you want some strategies to understand how to grow better, right? And they're like, sure. And then you're off and running. All right, customers start with friends and family. I've talked to a lot of people who say, I want 1 billion customers in the next 5 years, and that is great. I admire that vision and ability, although you got to start with your first 10 or 20, and that's hand-to-hand combat, right? That's usually friends and family. You got to go out and you got to tell your friends and family, you're buying this, right? They're like, are you going to give me a discount? And you're like, no, you're going to pay full price. I learned that from Dharmesh Shah, co-founder of HubSpot. He charged his wife full price. His wife, full price for the HubSpot product, right? In 2006, she was the second customer of HubSpot. And I'm like, you really charge your wife full price? He's like, yes. And if you're a good entrepreneur, you're willing to pay at full price because it's karma and it's the way we build great entrepreneurs. All right, focus exclusively on priorities. Okay, this is the toughest thing for entrepreneurs because you're so positive all the time, right? And you want to do a lot of stuff, right? But it's hard to run multiple businesses. And as soon as you move that focus from one particular niche to multiple niches, you're by definition diluting the ability, the time, the effort, the money that you can put to that niche, right? And as an advisor to dozens of companies and serve on the board of directors, the most important thing in the startup stage is you're like, this is what you're going to do. This is the amount we're going to do it. So everybody in this audience, you better have a spreadsheet that says this is the number of new customers I'm going to bring in, the amount of revenue that I'm going to bring in, the expenses, and the profit or loss I'm going to have by month for all of 2024. There's nothing more important than that, because that's the only way that we can figure out whether you're ahead or behind. And if you don't have a plan, right, it's too messy, right? And things change too much. And we know things are going to change. You're all bought into things going to change. Then focus on the priorities. And I'm going to give you a way to focus on the priorities in 2 more slides. Somebody said this earlier, and I'm just going to double click on it, because I tell all of our entrepreneurs, you're always right. Because if you're right, you're right. Celebrate that, right? Because there's a lot of times you may not be right, but if you're wrong, you're still right, because you're never going to do that again, right? And that's really the learning experience that you have for being an entrepreneur. And the key of being a good entrepreneur is the ability to, like, happily go from one disaster to the next, right? And just that's the way it works, right? As long as it doesn't take the company and completely destroy it, right? You're going to learn that lesson. That's why second-time entrepreneurs are so much more investable than the first time, all the lessons that they learned, right? And so that's the way to learn. You have to go through the tough stuff to get there. I tell all companies, if you have more than 5 employees, go get 3 advisors. Right? I like 3 because 5 is too many and 1 is a little bit weird. It's a odd number, so if they have to vote, right? There's lots of information of how to find an advisor, but those advisors shouldn't be marquee advisors. They should be people who meet with you on a quarterly basis. 4 times a year, you buy them either beer or sandwiches, depending on what they like, and you show the forecast. You tell them the 3 things you learned over that quarter, the 3 things you're going to change in the quarter, and they should know your business well enough so they can help you see around corners, right? You want them to really understand the business model. Now, sometimes people will have these big-time, large company advisors, like they work in Johnson & Johnson and they work at pharmaceutical companies, and that's good, right? Except they don't understand the startup experience. Right? If you've worked for a Fortune 500 company for your entire life, it's really hard to dig in and understand what it's like sitting in your basement trying to sell your first 3 customers. And so I always suggest that one of your 3 company advisors is somebody who's gone through the startup experience that really understands. And then this last one, you guys, do you routinely ask for help? Raise your hand if you routinely ask for help. Yeah. Luis is raising her hand because that's exactly what she did. And some people think that it's a sign of weakness. I happen to think it's a sign of strength. You're not expected to know anything. You can't know everything, right? It's ridiculous, right? At a very early stage, I learned to ask a lot of questions to anybody. And if you know somebody that can answer the question, you ask for 15 minutes. That's a magical term. Everybody has 15 minutes no matter what's going on. Just say, I need 15 minutes to ask you this question. Send it to them in advance, right, with as much detail as they can look at it. And if they've gone through the problem before, boom, they can answer it, right? If you don't know the person, it's still an opportunity to say, I'm a scaling entrepreneur. I saw your background or I've heard your name. Luis and I just did it. She wants to work for Techstars in New York City. And she's like, all right, I need to get to someone in Techstars in New York. I'm like, all right, find the right person, which she did in 10 minutes. I sent him an email that said, your name came up in a conversation in Riga, Latvia today. It would be interesting to see whether he opens that or not. I happen to think he will. And then we could say, my friend Luis is looking to join Techstars in New York and see what happens. But that is the way in which entrepreneurs grow and learn, and it's critically important. All right, this is the book I wrote. It's available on Amazon and all over the place. Todd Hockenberry was my co-author. If anybody wants to write a book, anybody write a book in the audience? Awesome, right? I learned so much about writing a book, right? Paul, you wrote a book? Unbelievable. So you know, writing a book is not like writing a book. Writing a book You write the book, then you write it again, then you write it again, right? 3 times, then you give it to your editor, they tear it apart, and it's an amazing experience, right? My speaker fee went from $3,000 to $10,000 when I published a book. Todd Hockenberry is the greatest co-author in the history of books. This guy was patient, he was thoughtful, I thought writing a book was like a speech. I thought you just get up there and you start spinning tales and things like that. That's not a book. A book is like logical, goes from one thing to the next. But this has everything that I learned about an inbound organization, right? If your company is 30 or so people, it's time to read this book and understand a little bit of what it's like. This is an important slide because this is an M-spot. This is what HubSpot used for the first 15 years to make sure everybody understood exactly where we were at. Number 1, M-spot stands for mission, strategy, plays, omissions, targets, and stretch, right? You can get this, you just Google M-spot. There's a variety of different ways that you can get it. But in 2024, most people prefer to work for a mission-driven company. Have you found that? Raise your hand if you think that that's a true statement, that people want to work for a mission-driven company. Right, you got 1 million, everybody's employable in 2024. There's a job for everybody out there. Even in the AI revolution, it's amazing, right? But companies have a mission. Then you change the work life from I'm just doing a job to I'm trying to help millions of small businesses grow better. And it's an incredible motivator to get the right kind of people. Everybody needs to know the mission. When I do consulting and go into a company, I'm like, all right, what's the mission? And the CEO will say something that's several sentences long, and I'm like, how many people do you think know that mission? He's like, everybody. I'm like, let's guess. All right, let's test it out. Let's go to the sales pit and see how many people know the mission. And of course, no one knows it, right? Because unless they're seeing it on a regular basis, it's just a plaque on the wall. The mission is very important. Your mission is only going to change every 10 years or so, right? And it's thoughtful, and it's why you're spending all this time and effort to do it. The strategy is who you sell to. For HubSpot, we sell to businesses. We sell through our partners, and our stakeholders are also shareholders and our employees. The plays are the 3 to 5, maybe 5 things that you're going to do in 2024. The targets are how you know if you're going to be behind or right at the target or ahead. The stretch goal is a stretch goal. This is how you know if you're a little bit further ahead. And every month when we show this at a company meeting, we'll show if it's in green or it's yellow or it's red, and whether we're on track for the stretch. But the most important thing is the omissions, right? Because we were talking about the priorities previously. Those omissions are great ideas that you have. And you guys are all you're idea hamsters. You come up with an idea every 3 hours. And they're good ideas, except you can't do them. Because if you do it takes away from the other priorities you have. So the beauty of the omissions in an M-spot is it's all on one page. If your M-spot takes up 3 pages, then you need work on your priorities. It shows all the things that are very important to everybody in the organization, cross-organizationally, cross-departmentally. They need to understand where they fit in this process, and then they need to know what the things that are important, but they're not going to do. And this is a very simple but effective way to do that. All right. I think we covered everything you want. Now we're open for questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan. Round of applause. Woo. Let's bring some chairs to the stage so, you know, we can sit down for a chat.
I'm not really a sitter. I like kind of walking around. I'm a pacer.
That's okay. Then I'm going to be standing as well.
Okay,
yeah. So we're on the level.
You're taller than I am.
I can do this. That's okay.
No, that's okay.
So for those of you just joining this stage, how it's going to go, basically, you are asking the questions through the QR code here. I'm simply going to be the voice of you. And we already have a couple of questions. And the first one, I'd say, is rather flattering to you. And it goes as such. I want to be your mentee. What can I do to become one?
Okay, so I run a mentor program for about 300 folks. I don't know if there's openings, but raise your hand if you've had good mentors in your life. Amazing. In 2010, I think it was, HubSpot didn't have a mentor program, and Brian Halligan came to me and said, will you start one? And I'd say, yeah, sure, what's going on? And so I went to the Helm meeting, which is the top 20 executives of the company, and I asked that question, how many people in senior executives at HubSpot in 2010 had good mentorship? Everybody raised their hand, 100%. So I started a mentor program at HubSpot for, I don't know, 50 people or so. And then one guy quit. And it was very interesting because he didn't tell me he quit. He didn't work for HubSpot for 4 months until he said, oh, by the way, I'm no longer at HubSpot. I'm like, what? And he's like, will you still mentor me? It's very, very important. This has been very influential in the growth and things. And so I asked Armesh, the co-founder of HubSpot, can I mentor people who are not part of HubSpot? He's like, Dan, mentorship is too important just to keep it internal to the company. Sure, knock yourself out. And so 10 years down the line, now we have 400 people in this program. If you go to dantyre.com, which is my website, you'll see the Tyre mentorship program. To make it effective, I've gone out and I've asked about 35 of my friends to help me out. I have about 25 mentees that I mentor myself, and then they have anywhere between 2 and 5. And it's a non-paid position, but they're senior folks where mentorship has been important in their development. There is a requirement to get in. It's a free program. It runs for 18 months. The requirement is you have to read a book. The book is called Succeed by Heidi Grant Halverson. And well, 1,000 people fill out the application. A very small percentage actually read the book. Once you read the book, you have to send me dantyre@gmail.com the 3 things you learned. That's how I make sure that people have actually done. Then you fill out a brief Google app. It's not a Google
form.
Google form. Thank you very much. And I'll match you up if it's you. Sometimes people have preferences. I want male or female. I want somebody who's more advanced. I want somebody who is a young entrepreneur. Those kind of things. And we'll make the connection. Right. Then you'll meet once a month for 18 months. Right? The mentor sets it up. He sets it up and puts it on your calendar. Some people want local mentors where they can meet face-to-face. Some people want, it doesn't really matter, that you can do it on Zoom. And it's been amazing. We have 4 community updates. We have lots of very talented mentors, and I feel like it's an important service to do for entrepreneurs all over the world.
Thank you so much. So the next question, regarding company culture. Do customers really care about company's culture?
What do you think?
Somewhat, because the company's culture shows a sort of an image, and people nowadays, they associate brands with also emotions and so on.
Nice. Do you like working with nice people?
Yeah.
Do you like working with grumpy people?
Not so much.
If you have a shitty culture, you're going to have grumpy people, right? That's just the way it works, right? You can tell a great culture. How many great cultures are out there? How many companies that you know where people are excited to come to work? They give their whole self. They are delusionally happy all the time. Anybody have a name of a company like that? Okay, 1 or 2. What's the name? OpenAI, good. We know yeah, of all the companies in the world, there's 1 billion companies, you can come up with 2, right? Having a good culture is friggin' hard, right? Because people are people. Right? And when you get to a certain size, it's hard to keep a lot of people happy. So you have to do it at scale. Remember, it's an operating system. Remember, those are expensive. Remember, you have to have a chief people officer who is the voice of the employee, right? You have to measure it all the time. Anybody who tells me I have happy customers or I have happy employees, I'm like, all right, prove it. Give me the data. And they're like, well, I talk to people all the time. I'm like, okay, that's like the most biased thing I've ever heard. Are my employees like, they seem happy? I'm like, really? That's ridiculous. And so when you actually go out and get all the data with an employee NPS survey, right? When you get 100% of the people and you see what people like and what they don't like, when you invest in programs where people understand, they feel heard, they feel like they can grow their career, where their personal development is in line with the company, then you have a much different scenario. Right? Then you have people who are excited to their personal needs are taken care of and that they can serve the customer. It makes a huge friggin' difference, right? And one of the great things about HubSpot, after 17 years, I didn't want to leave, right? The greatest people in the world. We called it peers before beers, right? Because everybody has the ping pong table and everybody has the perks and things like that. But what HubSpot had is unbelievable people that all understood the culture code, that we're all working towards the mission of helping millions of small businesses grow together. And that's so much more dynamic, important, and fulfilling than going out and selling insurance. Or like, I've talked to companies, I'm like, what's your mission? He's like, to make $100 million. I'm like, that's not really motivational for most of your employees. And they're like, but that's what we want to do. I'm like, all right, well, can you like, create something where there's actual human feeling involved in understanding why you're spending all this time at work? And sometimes they can and sometimes they can't.
Thank you so much.
All right, did I make my point why culture is important? Raise your hand if you I can go back and there's other examples, right? Great cultures are hard. If they were easy, raise your hand if you ever worked for a company that it was painful to leave. Painful to leave. All right, there's some good, very good. There's some good cultures out there. You take all the things that you learned in those cultures, bring them to your company. Right? Lots of the things that I learned because I'm like, I'm never going to do that. Oh my goodness. I started my career, I think I was saying something today, worst run company in American business. This company had inventory problems, nepotism problems. They lied, they cheated, they had horrible employer. And for the first 10 years after that, I'm like, okay, what would the computer store do? I'm going to do the exact opposite. It served me very, very well in my entrepreneurial journey.
Thank you so much. I see we still have 5 minutes left, but there's quite a lot of questions.
Go.
So, do you hire and invest more in people of color and women because they want to prove themselves and others they can do it and put in higher effort?
Oh, great question. Okay, very good. A couple of things. If you're selling to black people, you better have black people on your board of directors and senior management and all throughout the organization. If you have a diverse horizontal target market, you better have different ideas and thought processes. In, I think it was 2015, HubSpot was not particularly diverse. And our first chief people officer, Katie Burke, said, this is not good, right? We want to change it. The way we're going to change it is be totally transparent. And T is one of the acronyms in HEART, which is our culture code. And so to do that, we published our statistics on gender equality, on ethnic equality, on age, all of these different things. And they sucked, right? If you saw it, we'd be like, oh, what's up? But because it was out there, that gave us a benchmark that we could grow. Today, more than, I think it's 50%. 4 women on our board of directors, 3 people of color, which is amazing, right? They're directing the company. The CEO of HubSpot is a brown woman, Yamini Rangan, brilliant person, right? Rarely do you see women lead billion-dollar tech companies. And I mentioned earlier that many of the senior executives at HubSpot are women. And you can tell, you can go in there. If you're a young woman coming out of college, where are you going to go to work for? Some tech company with lily white in Silicon Valley, or someplace where you can really make a difference, where somebody understands the impact of that. And so number 1, it's a competitive advantage, right? Number 2, it's kind of the right thing to do. Number 3, the different opinions of understanding how to approach problems are impossible to get if you're just hiring the same person over and over.
As a part of Riga Tech Girls, this was music to my ears, hearing this.
Nice.
So next question. How has the pilgrimage helped you in your everyday life?
Ooh, anybody ever been on a pilgrimage? You have? Okay, 1, 2. All right, so I had no idea what a pilgrimage is. My beautiful wife, Amy Tyre, been married 34 years. I got the big energy. My wife has all the brains. She comes to me a year ago. She goes, do you want to go on a pilgrimage? And my answer was yes. And then I stopped and said, what is a pilgrimage exactly? Because I had no idea, right? And she's like, it's a sacred journey where you go visit shrines and temples and churches. You pray to heal the world. I'm like, oh my goodness, who didn't want to do that? And so I took 5 weeks and I went with the Himalayan Institute, which is in both the United States, India, and in Africa, and this incredible spiritual master, Pundashi, and went with 35 other pilgrims and went to all of these holy shrines and places and learned a little bit about the Hindu religion, lived with farmers in northeast India, and prayed to heal the world. And it was life-changing. It was amazing, right? If you really want to have gratitude for your life today, go to northeast India and live with people who don't really live in houses, who can only work in the fields, who have no access to medical care, who take a shower in a bucket, right? No warm water, right? Every time I turn on the warm water now, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so blessed, I have so much, I'm so privileged, right? And like healing the world is an important thing for everybody. It's a little spiritual, but when the programs got going, they would chant Sanskrit prayers from the sutras that were amazing, right? And I think we made a little bit of a difference. And if you want more information, I'm happy to send it.
Thank you so much. This might be the final question, depending on the answer. Any advice on warm calling, emailing for companies who don't have big client base to back them up yet?
Yes, everybody starts with 1. right? If you don't have any clients, you can still get a new client. You can just say, you're going to be my first client. That transparency is important. And why would somebody hire you if they're your first client? Anybody guess? Why would somebody hire you? Anybody know? Right? Because you're going to out-hustle the competition. You're like, you're going to be our first customer, and here's my personal cell phone, right? We will make sure you're the happiest customer. You'll always be the first customer. HubSpot did something that was amazing. In the early days, as we raised prices, we never raised prices on customers because we were indebted to our early customers, right? When we first started HubSpot, the technology wasn't that great. And because I sold it, I know that it was a little bit iffy in certain areas. But because they were in early, because they supported our scale, we never raised prices on them. So 17 years in, there are still people who are paying $250 a month for HubSpot because they made that investment 17 years ago.
So we still have 15 seconds. Let's try a quick lightning round. If you were to start a CRM in 2024, what tips you would give yourself?
Make sure it's AI engaged, and make sure that you're adding value for customers. What you'll see now is lots of people buy leads, right? Buy email addresses, things like that. In the next 3 years, you'll pay for qualified opportunities, which will be a significant change, right? You'll also see AI on both sides where you'll be able to put up your profile where people say, oh, this is a perfect person for us to identify and to sell with, and that person will say, okay, this is the right fit, and it will happen automatically.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Round of applause to Dan.
Yeah, that was great.
I know we didn't answer some of the questions. He's still around, so politely approach him. But yeah, thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks, Paul.